Good day, everybody. I am the Anthropologist next door, and this is RANThropology, where we will be talking about, ranting about, and rambling about everything and anything that pisses me off and confuses me with our own culture. So today we will be talking about and ranting about the idea na basagulero ang mga tao. Yes, you heard me right. I'm claiming that as a species, we are very prone to fighting each other. No matter how far we've come as a people in the realm of diplomacy and negotiation, pakikipag-usap, pakikipagkapwa-tao, still sometimes the best way that we think about handling things is go up to a guy and smack him in the face. Bakit nga ba tayo ganito? When in our evolutionary history, did we start thinking that, hey, maybe the pen isn't really mightier than the sword? According to biologists, we have to go way back. Back when we were still single-celled organisms crawling out of the primordial hole that we came from. They were saying that we needed to be fighters in order for us to not just survive, but to thrive. Because of what the earth was and what the earth still is, which is a giant serial killer that wants to kill everything that has ever walked this earth, we needed to be fighters. Mama raised no weakling, Mama raised a tough guy, and that was the reason why we were able to go through this traction of evolution that led us to where we are now. Fighting is so ingrained in our DNA that scientists are saying that this is the only constant thing throughout our journey to become Homo sapiens. And when we became Homo sapiens, it didn't even change. We still fought against animals, the elements, and against each other. You could even say that because of this, our evolutionary story could probably resemble a Rocky movie montage, full of fighting, full of beatings, full of getting punched in the face. So the point being here is that fighting is something inherently human. It's very instinctual. Unlike the other concept, which is loving. We have been fighting for millennia even before we had developed brains as Homo sapiens. But the concept of marrying for romantic love wasn't around up until the Middle Ages. People before the Middle Ages were marrying because of alliances, because of economics, because you needed a husband to protect your lands, and you needed a wife to reproduce and keep your bloodline going. How crazy is that? Imagine, we were killing each other more and bashing each other's brains longer than we were actually proposing to other people and telling them that we love them and we'd love to spend our lives with them forever and ever. Think about that. Are we just doomed to become very violent species who resolve things by stabbing each other? There's a reason why we aren't doing that right now, and it has something to do with this thing called culture. Because culture has put in place a lot of measures to ensure that violence and fighting isn't our first option in terms of dealing with things in day-to-day life. What has stopped you from tearing up the limbs of that pesky neighbor who keeps on parking in front of your driveway? Why didn't you go to that other neighbor's house last night and went all World War III on his house, on his family, just because he was blasting Victims of Love ng alas 2 ng umaga, Diyos por Santo? Why didn't you do it? If you guys answered, I don't want to go to jail and rot there forever, yes, you are right. There are laws in place, morals in play, institutions set up to basically train people to not use fighting as the first means to resolve things. Almost in all cultures around the world, fighting is very much regulated. And I emphasize the term regulated, not prohibited, regulated. And we'll go back to that point later. Again, which wasn't always the case throughout our evolutionary history. We used to have the need for this thing called alpha male, wherein the strongest member of the pack, usually the male of the species, would be fighting for everything from food to shelter to protection to even the ability to mate. If you were the alpha male, it meant that you were the strongest one in your pack and you were the one to reproduce with the pack. So imagine having a life like that. I couldn't imagine. It would be so chaotic. Because we have developed the ability to talk and reason out, we did not need to have thicker skulls anymore. We only needed thicker skulls because we were hitting each other in the head instead of talking. And now, because we weren't doing that as often, we were able to evolve in such a way that we had thinner skulls, hence bigger brains. So our brains had more room to grow and therefore allowed for us to have more complex thoughts. We are walking around now with bigger brains. Well, at least some of us are.
Hi, I'm Johnny Knoxville. Welcome to Jackass.
Just because we were able to talk and reason out instead of bashing each other in the head. And not only that, but sociologists are saying that everything we are experiencing now in society, the social norms, the social practices, the social institutions and structures are basically just byproducts of us talking instead of hitting each other. We have all these social functions just because we learned how to cooperate and compromise as human beings. So yay! We have learned how to talk instead of fighting each other. But, there's a big but, not everything else is hippity holding hands. We are the world, peacemaking, lovemaking until the end of time as of now. Why are still people fighting? Why are we still experiencing conflict that lead to violence and war? Much like that ex you have been telling everyone about that you have moved on from. Violence and fighting still rears its ugly head to influence and inform our daily lives. In fact, we have gone so far as to equate different symbolisms to violence and to fighting as extended that are way beyond its initial and original meaning. Many cultures around the world have actually associated a lot of different meanings with fighting and violence per se. Well, true, we are still fighting for and about the things we were fighting for and about before, such as food, shelter, resources, existence. We have now chosen to equate them with much bigger things or much more abstract things such as nationhood, equality, freedom, religion, ideology, family.
I don't have friends. I got family.
And this is because with our culture, and I said earlier that we are regulating fighting, it is okay to fight as long as the cause is just. Such is the evolution of man and fighting that we are now able to identify and create identities with fighting. I can name a whole lot of cultures that have devoted a portion of their identity to fighting itself. The warriors of Greece, the warriors of Rome, ancient samurai feudal society. Locally speaking, we have the Bugkalot headhunters and the Kalinga warriors up north. People have equated identities with being able to fight and fighting in a certain way. Fighting has become so central in the formation of identities that even religions have chosen to equate themselves with having a fighting identity. Imagine that. Religions telling people to love thy neighbor and turn the other cheek are also espousing things with regards to fighting. The Christians had their crusades. The Muslims have the jihad or the holy war. Even Buddhism, a religion that espouses peace at all costs, have the concept of the warrior monk. fighting has become so central in our culture that even forces preventing us from fighting have once endorsed fighting if and when it suits them. So back to my original point, where does this leave us? Why do I think that fighting, the concept of it, is such a paradox? It is detrimental to our development as people, while it is also at the same time instrumental to our development as human beings. If we would summarize everything that I have said, you could even conclude that, well, we wouldn't be here if we weren't able to fight. As an anthropologist and a student of culture, I am finding it amusing and confusing that the whole concept of fighting within the context of our culture is such a paradox. We are saying that fighting is what makes us human. It is instinctual. It is something that we as a species have been designed, born, and bred to do. While at the same time, culture is telling us fighting is bad. Fighting is the last resort. Fighting has no place in our society. Which is also the same culture that has venerated and made heroes out of people who have fought for various reasons that culture deems appropriate for fighting. One can't help but feel confused about why fighting still exists. And I think this sends kind of a mixed signal to people about fighting. We have always romanticized the idea of fighting the good fight. But we do have people and structures telling us to not fight. I mean, take for example bullying. I'm not a psychologist. Psychologists can handle bullying and the solution to it better. But think about the messaging that we are sending about bullying. We're saying that it's okay to stand up for yourself, but when we have a kid who punches back to a bully, we reprimand the kid for fighting back, wherein the kid would say, well, I was just only defending myself, and we frown upon the use of violence. But in that case, well, what was the kid supposed to do? Culture has dictated that if I am threatened, my safety is threatened, I can fight. As a human being, I am designed to fight. I am able to fight. So why would I not fight back if people were basically hurting me? At the end of the day, fighting, much like a lot of concepts in culture, is hard to discuss and encapsulate through one single lens. I think the most important thing to realize and recognize here is that fighting will always be present regardless of how far we will make it in terms of human relations and diplomacy. Still, there are things as human beings who have crawled out from single-cell organisms and conquered this world that we will need to fight for and fight against. It's that simple. As long as we live on this earth and are interacting with others, we will definitely come into blows with them. And that, I think, is something that we must acknowledge for us in order to develop a deeper understanding of why we fight. Because at the end of the day, isn't that what's important? Why are we fighting and how can we avoid it? Why are we fighting? Is it worth for me to fight? And lastly, are we willing, or am I willing, to face the consequences in polite society, as we call it, if I do get into a fight with someone? Now, understanding that might provide you wisdom in terms of choosing when and how and who you should fight with. This is Neil, your next door anthropologist with RANThropology. Till next rant.